Hey everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Today we're going to be talking about the job market, the Q2 update. We collected information from about a dozen different companies that we work with, small companies, big companies, owners, managers, recruiters from all these different staffing agencies to try to bring you guys some job numbers and some trends that the different agencies are seeing. So Whitney's going to introduce us and then we'll jump in and talk about the job market.
Thanks for joining us. We're Whitney and Jared Kazaza. We have been traveling doctors of physical therapy since we were new grads in 2015, so we've been in the industry for over a decade now. We have been doing these job market updates since 2019, just bringing you all the information about the industry and the changes over the years that have happened. Started out, kind of telling you guys some different staffing changes that were happening with like Medicare changes, and then through the pandemic, and then kind of what's happened since then. So we like to bring you guys information about what you can expect if you're a current traveler or if you're someone who's thinking about getting into travel therapy. We encourage you to go back and listen to our older videos and podcasts to learn more about travel therapy if this is your first time joining us. If you are watching live on Facebook or Instagram, we'd love if you'd say hello. And then shout out to those of you that will watch it later on the replay on our YouTube or podcast. Before we dive into tonight's job market update, we do have a couple updates. So we are currently running a sale on our travel therapy course. Our course is titled Becoming a Financially Successful Travel Therapist, and this is unique because we don't just teach you about travel therapy, but we also teach you how to use travel therapy to get into a good financial position, which is what a lot of people, why they want to pursue travel therapy, and it's what we've done with our careers and been able to semi-retire and no longer work full-time as clinicians through savvy financial strategies and really maximizing the opportunities available within travel healthcare. So if that is something you're interested in, it's currently 50% off through tonight, which is Sunday, May the 17th. So now's a really good opportunity to get that at a great price. And we did get some questions about when would you have access to it? It's at your own pace. So if you enroll in the course now, you have unlimited access to it to watch it at your own pace, whether that's now or in a couple of months when you're ready to start it. You'll have indefinite access to it over the years. So yeah, go check that out on our website if you want to learn more about what is in the course, and feel free to send us a message if you have any questions. All right, I think so. I think that was the main thing that's coming up right now.
Okay, so overall, job market wise, summary is the travel therapy job market is still very strong, stable with high demand for therapists all over the country. And we've basically been kind of saying this for coming up on 4 years now. This has been some of the best time ever to be a travel therapist. And it has remained strong. The job markets, the numbers are pretty high. Pay rates right now are good, even despite the cost of living being higher. All the companies are very, I would say the majority of companies, of course you're going to get a variety of opinions, but the majority of companies are very constructive on the market and going forward that it's going to be continue to be good. So anybody considering getting into travel therapy right now, it seems like a really great time still. No signs on the horizon of anything changing. Pay rates probably are going to stay high. Job openings are probably going to stay pretty high. There's pretty consistently more travelers than there are, or more jobs than there are travelers. So if anything, it's the facilities that are suffering right now, not travelers. So very good job market overall.
Yep. So we'll dive into some of the details. First, we want to go over the total number of jobs available nationwide. And then we're going to give you a range of jobs available because we asked, as Jared mentioned, 12 different companies that we work with. Some of them are smaller companies, some of them are bigger companies. So if you're newer to the travel therapy industry, it's important to understand that each company is going to have access to different jobs. A lot of them have access to maybe 50 to 75% of the same jobs. Those are going to be ones that go through what's called a VMS, a vendor management system, or the MSPs, the managed service providers, where these big databases of jobs, basically where a lot of people have access to them. Where the outliers are going to be is that companies will have direct clients that maybe only them and a couple of other agencies have access to those jobs. So that's where you're going to see the variation. And typically your smaller companies have access to a smaller number of jobs, bigger companies, bigger number of jobs. And again, there's pros and cons to working with small and large companies, which is why we recommend that you work with 2 to 3 different agencies to see a good variety and make sure that you're not missing out on any opportunities. So when we give you these job numbers, it's a range because some of them, we just kind of took the lowest and the highest numbers.
Yeah, so for PT right now, anywhere from 700 to 1,700, which that's an outlier. I would say probably most companies it's like 700 to maybe 1,200 open PT jobs. For OT, 150 to 500. For SLP, 100 to 700, which 100 is definitely on the lower end. Most of them were higher on that higher end. PTA 150 to 400, and CODA 50 to 250. So these numbers still very high. OT, SLP, CODA are probably about where they've been. PT and PTA jobs are a little bit higher than they've been recently, which is a good thing to see. And what's really interesting to us is seeing PTA jobs so high now. So 150 to 400, it wasn't that long ago that PTA jobs were 50 to 100 jobs in the whole country. So it's really good to see some of these assistants getting more opportunities for travel positions. A lot of that is just because these facilities are trying to hire PTs or OTs and they can't find them. So they're settling for PTAs or CODAs, and they're just making do with PRN staff or something for evaluations and discharges and things like that. So it's really good to see that. We've had PTAs and CODAs for probably 5 or 6 years now asking us if they should travel. And for quite a bit of that time, we said probably not, because you had to be really, really open to setting a location to find consistent work as an assistant. And then nowadays, it actually is pretty good. CODA still can be a struggle. You probably need multiple state licenses. But for PTAs, it's very reasonable to get back-to-back contracts, not have a whole lot of issues, and to be fairly selective.
And when Jared says, the facilities are willing to settle for an assistant, we didn't mean that in such a negative connotation. It's just more that, they may need an evaluating therapist, but if they're not able to get an evaluating therapist, then as a traveler, then they may try to cover their caseload with an assistant and then just use PRN staff to come in and do the evaluations when they're available, which is hard. It's hard on staffing. We've worked in those types of facilities where the assistants are kind of running the caseload and they only see their evaluating therapist sometimes, but it's just what some of the facilities have to do. We've even heard of some using virtual providers to come and do evaluations because they don't telehealth, they don't have any other option. But yeah, that's why we think that we're seeing in particular an uptick in the PTA jobs, because maybe the facility would prefer a PT, but they're having trouble getting a PT, so they're like, okay, we're going to make it work with the PTA. So that has helped the PTA.
Definitely not to settle in a negative sense, more settle as in, a lot of these places would prefer someone that can do evaluations and discharges, but if they can't find that, then they will take assistants often.
Yeah. So that's a really good thing. As Jared said, the assistant market is better than we've seen in a long time, so it's definitely a lot more viable option as an assistant. As we can see, physical therapists are still leading the pack, with most companies having well over 1,000 physical therapy opportunities nationwide. So really PTs have the pick of the litter, which means, as we get into things like talking about new grads, you have more job opportunities as a new grad PT than any other new grads because there's just so many openings. You have more opportunities to be picky. It really is more of a therapist's market now to be more particular about what you want in terms of setting, location, and pay.
So then we asked them how the job market has been so far. So just to talk a little bit more about that, generally very strong with high numbers of job openings. Even seeing some jobs in highly desirable areas like Tampa, Austin, and Charlotte, and more jobs than therapists to fill them, and it's a therapist market. So we've actually seen this quite a bit lately. On our hot jobs list, every week we put out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, a reel showing some of the better jobs on the list. And it's crazy some of the locations we're seeing now. It was locations that would have never taken travelers not that long ago.
Yeah.
So you're seeing jobs in Charlotte, places in Florida that are very desirable areas, all over California in desirable areas. So, there was a time period there where most travel contracts were in less desirable areas. There is a reason why sometimes travel gets a bad rap for going to the middle of nowhere, because a lot of times those are facilities that need travelers. But lately that has not been the case. I mean, of course, there's always going to be contracts in areas where they have a hard time filling permanent positions. But recently, if you want to go to more desirable areas, you can definitely find those contracts.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, you wouldn't have seen jobs in these places like Charlotte. Jared mentioned, we're from Virginia, so Charlotte stands out to us, and Raleigh, Asheville, North Carolina, super desirable East Coast areas. Even New York City, I've seen some more in New York City, and hardly would ever see New York City. Tampa, Jacksonville, Florida, some pretty desirable locations there. Denver, you can find jobs so easy in Denver now, or Denver suburbs, and that used to not be the case. Austin, some really desirable places. San Diego, we see quite a few San Diego jobs that you definitely wouldn't have seen before, and high pay rates too. Especially for PTs. So it's amazing. I will say the caveat to this, if we look at the whole of the therapy world, it's like, why are these jobs open? Unfortunately, it probably means there's a lot more burnout and a lot more permanent therapists not wanting to work full time anymore, or not wanting to take certain jobs, and it's opening up opportunities for travelers to come in and take these jobs. We see a lot more people wanting to leave therapy in general these days, and I think there's things like tightening down of Medicare, cutting back on reimbursements. It's kind of putting a squeeze on therapists a squeeze on the owners of some of these facilities where they can't pay the therapists what they want to be paid, while still making a profit. So it is difficult, but it is putting us as travelers in a position to go in and fill these needs and make high pay.
Yeah, and that's one side of the coin. And then the other side is that, the baby boomers are aging rapidly, and that's a huge cohort of people. And as they get older, they need more therapy services, so the demand is going up. At the same time, the supply of therapists is it's probably going to be fairly stagnant going forward, I'd imagine, because a lot of these schools are also now being squeezed with the changes in student loans. So there's a lot of things in favor of travelers right now, therapists in general. Besides, of course, reimbursement rates are not great, but in terms of demand and being in need, we're very much in need.
Mm-hmm. So, this is a positive thing if you're someone who's kind of on the fence about getting into travel therapy, especially if you're looking at leaving a permanent job, because that can be a scary situation where you're like, I don't know if I really want to make this life change, but just know that it's a very stable market. You have a lot of opportunities. We don't anticipate any changes in that. You have a lot of options. I will say that, the biggest negative and what we hear a lot from people is having trouble making sure that you make affordable choices when it comes to finding the right pay rate versus the cost of living in the area. And you do have to be a bit more savvy when it comes to that and take a look at the housing in advance and make sure that you can find affordable housing so that you're still coming out ahead financially, even with these good paychecks. Because sometimes you see $2,500 a week, $2,800 a week, but if the cost of living is astronomical in that area, are you really coming out that much ahead? So it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I can pretty confidently say that right now I would not, there's not a time period in the last 10 years that we've been in this industry that I think it is safer to leave a permanent job to start traveling. Because there's almost no situation, almost any market in the country, where you're going to leave and if you hate it, not be able to go back to a facility around there. It's not like, it used to be in our area, in Southwest Virginia, the job market was pretty tight. And I remember when we graduated in 2015 that I was thinking, man, it's going to be kind of hard to find outpatient jobs in Roanoke and maybe we should travel. That is not at all the case anymore. There's probably a dozen places that would hire us as outpatient PTs here right now. So there's never been a better time, I would say, to leave a permanent job, travel, see if you like it. If you hate it, you can almost always find another permanent job.
And that goes for new grads too. There's not a lot of risk as a new grad jumping into a travel job. If you take one travel job and you decide that the travel life is not for you, then it's only 13 weeks. You can just immediately come back and, apply for that same permanent job that you would have applied for 3 months ago. Yep. It's probably still going to be there. So there's, not a lot of risk in trying travel right now.
Yeah. So kind of mentioned this earlier, but we asked them what they foresee for the travel therapy market for the rest of the year. The vast majority said that they expected it to remain strong, to continue to see growth in job openings and steady pay rates. So there's no indication that anything's slowing down anytime soon. There's probably going to be, and like I said, there's just not enough therapists graduating to fill the demand for all of the people that need therapy going forward. And that's going to be the case for at least a decade, probably 15 or 20 years as baby boomers get older and fewer and fewer people are going to be able to afford to go to grad school. Obviously we all know that tuition is insane already. People are reconsidering their choices now to take out $200,000 in debt to be a therapist. So I think there's going to be fewer people graduating and more patients. So the next decade, the next 15 years probably are going to be really good for travel therapy or therapists in general.
Yeah. All right, so the next question that we ask the staffing companies that we work with are what settings have the highest demand for each discipline? So for physical therapists, overwhelmingly, they said that outpatient is the highest demand. And this has been such a big change. We talked about this in our more recent videos, but back when we first started traveling in 2015, there was not a lot of demand for travelers in outpatient. Those jobs were pretty much all taken with permanent therapists. They didn't need a lot of outpatient therapists. A lot of that changed after COVID. There's been just a lot of changes in outpatient in general. And we think it has to do a lot with the reimbursement rates and the facilities having trouble paying permanent staff and whatnot. But then also just as Jared mentioned, aging patients. So there's a ton of need in outpatient physical therapy. And I think that makes up for a big part of the difference in the number of outpatient PT jobs, or PT jobs in general, that you see over occupational therapy or speech therapy. It's because there's so many more outpatient PTs needed. So outpatient is the number one need for PTs. The next would be skilled nursing. There's a lot of need in skilled nursing for PTs. And then there's also still a strong need in hospital and home health for PTs.
Yeah, for OTs, it's mainly skilled nursing. That's the majority of the jobs, but that's followed by schools or hospital, schools, and then outpatient. So definitely we do see more skilled nursing jobs for OTs, but if you do want to find a hospital or school job, you can definitely find those as well.
Yeah, may just have to be a little bit more flexible on location.
Yep.
And then for SLP, the primary need is going to be schools and skilled nursing. So if you want to work with pediatrics, tons and tons and tons of school openings for SLPs. And if you want to work with geriatrics, the majority of your SLP openings are going to be in skilled nursing, but you are going to see a decent amount in hospitals as well, and some outpatient pediatrics.
Okay, so then we wanted to ask what locations or states are you seeing a lot of job openings currently? The top states that came back were California, Texas, Arizona, Washington, Massachusetts, Georgia. Most of those are names that we've talked about in the past. We did a video on like what states have the most jobs. Those states are pretty consistently near the top of the list. I would say probably all of those are usually in the top 15.
And it's pretty much always going to be California. And I saw one, somebody on Instagram said the Bay Area of California is in great need. I've been working at the same facility since 2023 in San Jose. Yeah, we see tons of needs in the Bay Area, the areas surrounding San Francisco in California, but all over California, you're going to see tons of jobs.
California job market right now is crazy. It's always been crazy. But I would say that probably there are more PT openings for travelers in California right now than there was in the whole country back in like early 2021. It's just insane how many jobs are in California. So you can we've talked about this before too, but you can easily be a traveler that just stays in California. Say you're from the East Coast and you want to go to the West Coast and just travel up and down California, go home for 30 days a year. You can easily make a whole career of just traveling up and down California, taking contracts. And
then we consistently see a lot of openings in Texas, Arizona, Washington, Massachusetts, and Georgia. Texas is kind of surprising. I don't feel like we used to see quite as many in Texas. We've actually been seeing a lot more in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that used to be like, you know, a very desirable area that was hard to get, but we're seeing a lot more in that area now. Arizona is a great bet. We had gotten an Arizona license back in 2016 or 17.
Yeah, something like that.
Or no, actually, it was after... It was 2018 because it was after our international trip. Anyway, because there were a lot of openings in Arizona at that time, we ended up working there, but tons of jobs in Arizona. We know so many people that work in Washington, Massachusetts, especially near Boston. We worked there, tons of jobs there. And Georgia, there's way more jobs near Atlanta than there used to be, and in the Atlanta suburbs. So those are really some of the hot spots.
Some other states that were mentioned, honorable mention, Virginia, Maryland, Florida, Colorado, North and South Carolina, New Jersey, DC, and then of course the rural Midwest locations. There's always a bunch of jobs out there like Iowa and Kansas. So if you want to be in the Midwest, you can almost always find pretty decent paying jobs there. And obviously cost of living is much less expensive than the East or West Coast.
Yeah, but we're seeing, a lot of coastal jobs, I guess, California, Washington, Oregon, but then also Virginia, Maryland, DC, the Carolinas, Georgia, all that. Pretty good.
Okay, so then we asked them, are you seeing any recent changes in rates, increasing, decreasing, or about the same? The majority of companies said generally steady or consistent. Some say rates are increasing, especially for PTs, which we have seen that there are some $3,000 a week jobs popping up again, which those were kind of gone for a little bit. And then there's higher rates in certain locations like hotter states for the summer. So states where people don't necessarily want to go, like Florida in the summer or Arizona in the summer. Sometimes you'll see higher pay rates there.
Yeah, and it's kind of seasonal. A few months ago, it's like the northern states. We wrote an article and did a video like in January, February, and it was like the northern states were paying more because it was harder to attract candidates because people want to go south in the winter and north in the summer. So right now, the really hot states like Florida and Georgia and all that, it's harder to find candidates, so they're paying higher to attract candidates.
Yep. A couple of companies mentioned that larger corporations are trying to drive down rates or have fees for VMS jobs. We've kind of seen this. They're limited in how much they can try to force rates down right now. Because if you try to, say you list a job, you're like an ATI or an Athletico or something, and you want to list a job at $1,800 a week, you can do that, but no one's going to take the job. So of course, a lot of these companies are getting squeezed because reimbursement rates are staying low, their costs are going up. I've talked about this in the past when we went through that big inflation spike in 22. Imagine being an outpatient owner right now. You have increased rent costs, you have increased support staff costs, you have to pay your front desk people significantly more than you did 6 years ago. Same with techs. You have electricity prices are increasing, water prices, everything is getting more expensive, but your reimbursement rates are the same or less. So they're trying any way possible to cut costs, and you can't blame them. A lot of these places are literally going out of business because they can't afford to pay all their costs. So they're trying to pay travelers less, but there's only so much they can do because there's so many jobs out there that it's like, if you want to hire somebody, you have to have a competitive rate. You can offer whatever, but no one's going to take it. And we've mentioned in a few videos ago, there's some of these jobs that are sitting open for months at a time, like 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. They need a traveler, but the rate or the location is not competitive enough for anybody to want to take the job.
Yeah, and then another thing that was mentioned was the VMS fees, and that's cutting into the pay package basically. So if you're talking to your recruiter or your recruiters, and a lot of them, hopefully if you're working with a good recruiter, like one that we've helped you get connected with, hopefully they're going to be transparent about this process with you and explain to you, this job is paying this, and maybe this is why this job is paying this amount. What we're seeing a lot is if it is a job that goes through the VMS or the vendor management system, they have to pay a fee in order to access that job. And that cuts into the pay package ultimately. So some of those jobs, it's nice to have access to them, but you're not going to get paid as much.
Yeah.
So that's where it helps you to work with a company that has a lot of direct clients, so you don't have to pay an extra fee that cuts into your pay package in order to get that job.
Yeah, you're always going to want a direct job, but there's not always going to be a direct job for what you're looking for. So a direct job is going to pay you more money because there's nobody taking a cut of it. But at the same time, say you want to go to outpatient in Miami, well, your options are going to be limited. So you might have to go through, you might take a job through a VMS versus a direct job. So it all depends on your preferences. Of course, if you just want the highest pay rate, you're probably going to not be taking VMS jobs. But, that's not always going to work out for everybody.
Yeah, so it's just one extra variable to understand. That way, if you're having transparent conversations with your recruiter and they're saying things like, I can only pay so much on this job because it has this vendor fee, and you're like, what are they talking about? Is that just, corporate chatter? I don't understand the lingo. Maybe they're lying to me. It's definitely a thing. It's definitely something to consider.
Yep.
The last thing as far as rates go, we did hear some of the recruiters were saying that they are seeing occasionally some lower rates offered for new grads. And we've mentioned before that actually sometimes this can be a strategy to use to your advantage as a new grad if you're trying to get your foot in the door for a desirable location or a desirable setting. Sometimes it actually helps you if you have your recruiter submit you at a lower rate so that you can get that job over an experienced candidate, because you have to think about it from the facility standpoint. If it's a desirable location, desirable setting, and they have a bunch of other candidates and you're asking for the same amount of money as someone who has 10 years of experience, well, they're going to take the candidate that has 10 years of experience. So, while you shouldn't necessarily, accept lower pay just because you're a new grad, you also have to look at the strategy side of it and think, well, do I just want to stand on my high horse and say I'm not taking a lower rate because I deserve to make as much as them? Or do you want to get that job?
Yeah. Again, this comes down to your priorities. If you are open to any setting, any location, then yeah, of course you don't need a job to take a lower rate. But say you want outpatient in Denver and there's only one outpatient job open, then okay, maybe you want to take a lower rate as a new grad so that you're more competitive for that job. Mm-hmm. So it all comes down to what your preferences are, what your needs are, which is why all the time we get questions about what's the best company, who's the best recruiter. There's no one size fits all for any of this stuff because everybody's priorities are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, when it comes to, we're going to talk a little bit more about new grads, but it is important that you have a good recruiter who can have your back and explain the nuance behind, these job submissions and your search criteria and all that. So we're happy to help you connect with a recruiter who works really well with new grads. We have tons of recruiters that are great at mentoring someone who's new to travel therapy, especially a newer grad in this industry.
Yeah, so right now we're working with over a dozen companies, and we have, I think, right around 60 recruiters that we send leads to, depending on whoever reaches out to us, what their needs are, the locations they're looking for, the settings they're looking for, the benefits they need, what personality of recruiter they want. We have a variety of options for everybody. So I think we have the best setup for trying to match people with recruiters and companies that are going to be a good fit for them.
Yeah, so reach out if you're ready to get started and you want help getting connected with recruiters. You can just go to our website at traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters and fill out that form, and it just comes straight to our email, and I'll read your message directly and respond to you, and handpick 3 recruiters that I think would be a good fit.
Yep. Okay, the next thing we asked about, are you seeing any change in contract cancellations? So this was a huge thing back during the pandemic. There was like an insane number of contracts being canceled. Your odds of having a contract canceled were probably 20% or more back then. These days, contract cancellations are not that common. We used to get a lot of questions about people saying like, oh man, my contract was canceled, what should I do? We haven't got one of those for probably more than 6 months. And it used to be like multiple per month. So the job market, extremely stable, not very many cancellations. And some of the companies actually said that if anything, more travelers are canceling contracts, which is a sign of a traveler's market. So what can happen in situations like this is, when there's a ton of job options, a lot of high pay, maybe you take a contract in Texas paying $2,200, but it's not exactly what you wanted, and then you're there for 4 weeks, and then a job pops up exactly where you want in California, and it's paying more money. Some people put in their notice and leave. We don't recommend doing that, but of course, when there's a lot of job options and a lot of high pay, people are going to be tempted to do that. And there's going to be some people that just, they don't care about burning bridges or anything like that. They're just going to go take that job, right? So in situations where it's a strong traveler's market, which it certainly is right now, you will see more travelers canceling contracts than facilities canceling contracts, and that is the case.
Yeah, but what this means for you is it's a stable market. You can be pretty assured that if you're going to take a travel job and you're going to commit to moving there, get the housing and everything, it's very low likelihood that you are going to get canceled. Of course, it does happen sometimes. Typically, it's because they find a permanent therapist to fill the position and they no longer need the traveler. But in general, it's very low likelihood.
Yep. We got a few more questions here. If you guys have any questions about anything we talked about, feel free to ask those.
Yep, so you can just drop your questions in the comments if you're watching live. If you're watching later, you can still leave it in the comments, or you can send us a message directly if you have any questions. So the next thing we asked the recruiters are the new grad therapists having luck getting placed in travel therapy jobs?
Yes. So for PTs, this has been the case for 5 years now. A lot of new grads are getting placed. We see, I would say, 5, 6, 7 people a month that reach out to us. New grads are getting placed in contracts. So especially right now, it's new grad season. A lot of people are just graduating, or some people are even taking contracts before they graduated. So we've had a lot of people recently getting placed. Great time to be a new grad PT traveler. We started as new grad travelers. It was not nearly as good of a market back then, and we made it work. So probably 5 or 6 times as many jobs open right now. So you can definitely travel as a new grad PT. For OTs, yes, but mainly in skilled nursing. So it depends on your preferences. If you're an OT that wants to work in hospitals as a new grad, it's going to be a little bit harder. So you just have to think about that. Or if you have a specific state you want to go to, it can be harder to find a job as an OT. But you can definitely still make it work. You just need to be flexible. For SLPs, primarily in schools, especially for CFs, and that's something we've recommended for a long time. If you want to do your CF as a traveler, which some people do, it primarily makes sense to do that in schools, because it's an 8 or 9 month contract instead of trying to line up multiple short contracts. It just is a lot easier that way.
Yeah. You do have to sometimes be flexible as a new grad, kind of as we talked about. If it's a competitive location or a competitive setting and they have a lot of other applicants that are experienced clinicians, then you are going to have more competition there, and it may be harder for you to get those jobs. So sometimes you have to be somewhat more flexible on location and setting as a new grad, but it's definitely possible to work. We've talked about before, some settings don't want to bring on new grads as much, especially hospitals, like your level 1 trauma centers. They want you to have more training, more experience, because it's a high risk environment for the patients. So if you are someone who wants to get into hospitals, it does sometimes help you to take a more rural contract, maybe a smaller hospital, get your foot in the door, get some of that experience on your resume before branching out and applying for these bigger name hospitals.
Yep. And then we kind of mentioned this earlier, but you, as a new grad, if you want to travel, make sure you have a good recruiter for that, because like we said, we've interviewed more than 100 recruiters now. And some of them, especially more established recruiters that are busy, sometimes they don't want to go through the hassle of answering a bunch of questions for new grads and trying to find a really good facility for them. They're just like trying to push you on something. If it doesn't work out, then they're not going to really help you out like you should be helped out. So make sure you have a good recruiter and work with a company that has a lot of new grad friendly contracts.
Yeah, and we can definitely help you with that. We have a ton of great recruiters that love to provide mentorship and education and guide you through the process and are really going to listen to your wants and needs. Especially if you say, you know, I would prefer a facility that can provide more mentorship, where there's going to be more ramp up time and training, they can help you identify those facilities.
Yep.
All right, so the last thing we asked the companies was, are there any other general insights that you have that you want to share? So we'll just kind of go through these individually. One company just wanted to reiterate that the PT and PTA travel market is so strong and continues to thrive, and we saw that in the job numbers.
Another one said, now's the time to lock in contracts. Some travelers are getting booked 2 months in advance. We've definitely seen that more often too. It used to be that the market was way more ASAP, and now facilities are listing jobs farther in advance because they know it could be harder to find a traveler to fill a position. So there's situations now where you can book contracts well in advance, just because you're in such high demand.
One company said that they're really seeing their company bounce back from last year, that this year has been all-time highs for them, even better than the last several years. They said they're continuing to focus on high priority direct job orders instead of those VMS orders that come with those fees we talked about. And we've heard that from a lot of companies. They're like, as much as possible, we're trying to focus on direct jobs where we can.
Another company was talking about AI, saying that the staffing world is using more and more AI, which I think probably the whole world is using more and more AI. But there's more like AI bots that are answering questions for travelers, which in a lot of cases that makes a lot of sense because an AI bot would be able to respond to you way quicker than a recruiter would for basic questions like what's the pay rate, what's the, you know, any general information about a contract. You might as well have someone that can respond to you right away. But of course, there's a lot of situations where you want more of the personal connection with the recruiter, and you also need someone that can actually answer like really in-depth things about a facility, not just something that is listed on a sheet or something.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to a little bit what we talked about in our last video where we discussed job boards. There's a lot of people that prefer to just kind of navigate the website, navigate the job boards, use the AI to find the information they need and not actually like get on the phone with a real recruiter. And that's totally fine. There are certain situations where that makes sense. But what this recruiter wanted to reiterate is that if you're the type of person who wants more help navigating your travel therapy career, really wants to build a relationship with your recruiter, that's still available to you. A lot of these recruiters are still out here doing that type of work. So we think there's a place for both. We think, you know, sometimes when you're doing your research, you just prefer to use the website, use the job boards, get the information that way. But we do feel like the best way to be a travel therapist and be successful in your contract negotiations is having a good relationship with recruiters.
Yep. Something else that this recruiter brought up that we've also been wondering about is they were wondering if any travelers are seeing more facilities using AI to help with documentation. So far, we haven't heard a whole lot about that. Our PRN jobs, they don't use AI at all, but I would imagine that you're going to see more and more of that. So if any of you guys have any feedback about contracts you've been on, if there's any AI integration now into the documentation system, and is that a good thing? Has it helped you out? We'd definitely love to hear that kind of feedback.
Yeah, let us know if you just want to send us a message on Instagram or something. We've even had like AI companies approach us, and they're wanting to market their AI documentation tools, which I think is a really good thing, and it's going to help us as healthcare providers to not spend so much time on our documentation. It was hard for us to want to be part of anything where we're going to promote that, because the thing is, as a traveler going to individual facilities, as far as we understand, you can't just choose to use that tool by yourself. You can't just come to the facility and be like, me as an individual PT, I use this for my documentation. It would have to be something that was approved by the facility, integrated into the EMR, make sure it's HIPAA compliant and all that. But so we'd be interested to know if any of you are seeing the facilities you're going to already integrating that into their documentation. Okay. Let's see. The next company that gave some feedback, they work with a lot of schools, and they said that the job openings, especially for OT, have been a little slower to open up this year, and they feel like that some of the school districts are having budget cuts, making them not wanting to use contractors as much. So they think they're really trying to fill it with permanent staff before they open up the opportunities to travelers. So that could be the case if you're somebody who's looking for school contracts. Maybe they're not rolling out quite as early this year, but maybe later this summer you'll see more opportunities if they're not able to fill the spots.
Another smaller company we work with said that the market and the options have never been better. We definitely agree with that. And seeing a very fast-paced market, jobs opening, closing quickly if it's a desirable location. So like always, you want to have a relationship with a recruiter so that you're able to jump on these jobs quickly when they're opening, instead of like, you know, going through a job board and taking a couple days to get submitted for the job and then it's already filled.
The next company was talking about strong opportunities nationwide, just depending on the location and setting, consistently strong demand, skilled nursing, outpatient, and some of the hospitals. They definitely want you to consider, and we talk about this too, it's not just about the pay. You definitely want to take into consideration gaining a diverse clinical experience, having a variety of experiences in different locations and settings. It all just comes down to your priorities. Maybe it's not always about the highest pay. Maybe sometimes you're choosing this contract because of the location, this contract because you want to break into a new setting. They also wanted to reiterate something that we've talked about before, being double submitted to jobs. So we do encourage therapists to work with more than one company in order to have more job opportunities. But you have to be pretty organized and make sure that you're doing things the right way so that you don't get submitted to the same job by multiple companies, because this can cause a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. You only want to be submitted to one job by one company. So if more than one company presents the opportunity to you, you need to decide before you submit which one you want to go with.
Yep. Another smaller company that works primarily with outpatient clinics said that they're seeing productivity demands increase in the outpatient market. So this kind of goes back to what we were saying. These clinics, especially independently owned small clinics, are getting really squeezed on both sides. They have declining or stagnant reimbursement rates with increasing costs, and so they're trying to figure out a way to make things still work without closing down. So they are either trying to increase the volume of patients or increase units for each patient, the standard things that clinics do to try to stay in business. So that, I think that's probably going to continue. I don't see anything on the horizon, especially with a government so in debt, running massive deficits. I don't think that suddenly we're going to have higher reimbursement rates, and I don't think costs are going to go down. So you're probably going to see more and more of that with these smaller clinics getting squeezed, and they're going to try to do anything possible to stay in business, seeing more patients or increasing productivity demands for therapists. But of course, it's not always going to be across the board. There's going to be some places that are in better position, like hospitals or physician-owned clinics that get higher reimbursement rates where it's not going to be as much of a concern. But any independently owned or chain outpatient clinic right now is probably going to have a push for higher productivity to some degree.
This recruiter also mentioned that he's seeing in some of the contracts where they're tying your productivity to your guaranteed hours. So he's saying that if you're not meeting the productivity for certain contracts, they're actually not honoring your guaranteed hours. So this is where you really need to read your contracts very carefully and understand, because I personally would never sign a contract where my hourly guarantee is tied to my productivity. So you really need to make sure that you understand your contract, discuss it with your recruiter. Now you're going to find yourself in some situations where, like, if you're being really particular on exactly wanting a certain location, that you might settle for a situation like that where they have high productivity or your productivity is tied to your hourly guarantee, but there's just a give and a take there. You're choosing that battle because you really want that location. But for us personally, we care about our quality of life and our work-life balance, so we wouldn't be signing a contract that has that type of stipulation. But just be aware, and this is probably more your outpatient chains and things that you're seeing this. He said he's not seeing as much of this with like their direct clients, the smaller outpatient clinics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned before, you have so many options right now. Just be very, ask a lot of questions in the interview, be selective on the places you're going. You can avoid all of this. You've got so many options right now that just interviewing thoroughly, you can avoid pretty much all the bad clinics. And we've talked about this before. A lot of the reason we started Travel Therapy Mentor is to teach people the questions to ask, to try to avoid the bad contracts, because we didn't like the bad reputation that travel therapy had when we graduated. And we obviously did not have a bad experience traveling, or we wouldn't have done it for so long. So you can really avoid these things. You just have to be smart about it.
Yeah. And the last bit of feedback we got from one of the companies, he just said, we're really thankful to your audience, which is you all, the therapists, for their impact on our world as healthcare providers. He said that these companies are blessed to have the opportunity to work with you, and they wish you all the best. So yeah, we're all in this together. Like the recruiters, the staffing industry, it's all to try to provide care and get therapists in these buildings to provide care to these patients. So I think we're all doing a good thing together, and I think it's great that travel therapy exists and that we can go fill needs in some of these locations and provide services to these communities that need it.
Yeah, and make a lot of extra money, pay off debt, all that stuff is
It's a win-win.
wonderful.
It's a win-win, yep. All right, so we have a few more comments that came in on Instagram. If anyone else has any comments or questions that they want to leave, if you're watching live, let us know. Again, just a quick reminder, we are running a sale right now on our travel therapy course. It ends tonight, 5/17 Sunday. The code is spring 2026. You can get 50% off our travel therapy course. Send us a message if you have any questions on that. All right. Let's see here. Someone on Instagram says, our facility just reached 100 skilled patients and our schedule is slowly increasing with unrealistic expectations. I'm seeing therapists with 11 to 15 in a skilled nursing, expecting group and concurrent. So 11 to 15 patients a day. And they want to use group therapy and concurrent therapy in order to get it done. Yeah, we've seen that a lot with skilled nursing where they're just trying to push the demands on you to see more patients. And obviously they're not getting as good quality of care if they're making you group them or do concurrent treatments rather than one-on-one individual care. And quite often it's not appropriate to group some of these patients, but they're just trying to get the minutes in. So that is very unfortunate. We see a lot of skirting the Medicare rules in skilled nursing especially.
Yeah, it's definitely on a case-by-case basis, but like in our opinion, we're never going to sacrifice our ethics to meet productivity expectations of a clinic. So we would, if it was a travel contract for us, we would not do that. So we've worked skilled nursing before where they tried to push us to see a lot of patients, build a lot of units. It was all about minutes back in 2019, and we just didn't do it. And they reprimanded us and they contacted our travel company and we explained the situation, and basically they ended up conceding because they didn't want to find new travelers. And we're always going to do the best we can. It's not like we're going in there to be lazy, but you can't have 90% productivity in these skilled nursing places without bending the rules or lying about your time, or there's ways that people they do these things, but it's not necessarily ethical. So we are definitely not the therapists that are going to do that, but we definitely know that there are therapists out there.
Yeah, the therapist said, what should I tell my director that's expecting 90% productivity? I feel bad for the new travelers that don't speak up on this. Yeah, this happens to a lot of people because you just feel compelled to do what your director is telling you to do. But like Jared said, we just always try to stand our ground. You can tell them it's not ethical. You can tell them this patient is appropriate to be grouped. This patient needs one-on-one care. This patient's max assist. Why am I grouping this patient?
You can also, like Whitney one time had a contract that was like that, and she did like a whole audit of her entire day where it was like every minute of the day she listed what she was doing, whether it was talking to nurses or finding wheelchairs or this place had a kind of like an assisted living, and she had to drive over to the person's apartment. And all of that time that's unproductive, what is that supposed to be accounted for? And when she went to the manager with that and was like, hey, I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to the bathroom one time a day. I'm doing everything I possibly can. And this is the productivity I have. I'm not going to change this. They were fine with it. There's only so much they can do.
Yeah, you just really have to stand your ground. And if it comes down to that, I've heard other therapists too, just jotting down what they're doing all day in order to explain the productivity. And the thing that always drove me crazy about these types of facilities, I was doing all these extra tasks.
Like too many side quests. Yeah, that's exactly right. Extra tasks, side quests.
Right. So I was always doing all these extra tasks, and I'm like, at this time, this was the year 2015. To me, probably a tech back then was like, what, $10 an hour, $12 an hour? Maybe that position pays more now. But to me, I was like, why are you paying me, a doctor of physical therapy, to run around and find wheelchair parts? And you could hire a tech at $10 an hour to be doing this job, or just schedule my patients, because it was almost like I was doing home health because I had different buildings. It was a retirement community, and I had to schedule my patients for the day. And I had to drive to their place. And so I'm like, this is unproductive time, but you could have an assistant do this, a tech do this, and take that off my plate, and then my productivity would be better.
But of course, what they want is for you to do those things off the clock so that you still have high productivity, and you're just quiet about it. So there's a lot of people that can be intimidated into that situation. So you do need to speak up for yourself. And there's a lot of therapists that will just go along with it. We've worked in a skilled nursing clinic where the therapist, if a patient refused or they couldn't see anybody, they would just clock out for 10 minutes. Well, that is terrible. That you're just wasting your own time. Now you're in the building for 9.5 hours, but you only get paid for 8. Like that's crazy. So you have to.
Well, and not to mention it's illegal. It's illegal to clock out and do your work. I worked PRN for a Genesis facility, which now they changed their name to Powerback because Genesis got so many lawsuits and everything. And we used to hear terrible things from travelers about working at Genesis buildings. And so they got in trouble with all these lawsuits that when I would, at my PRN job, have to clock out, I would have to sign an attestation that said I did not work off the clock because it is illegal. And so these things where they're wanting you to document off the clock or whatever, it's illegal. And so if it comes down to it, you have a conversation with your recruiter, you have a conversation with your manager and say that these things that you're asking me to do are illegal, they are unethical, and I'm not going to do them. And it's very unlikely they're going to fire you. If they do, you know what, it's your license that you're protecting, but it's very unlikely. So you have to push back, you have to stand your ground, and they're going to back off, and they're going to make adjustments. And this goes a lot for outpatient too. We have facilities where our last outpatient job, they were trying to triple book Jared's schedule, and they would just slide it in on there. And had he not said something like, they're just going to do it, they're just going to keep adding patients to your schedule, and you have to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I didn't agree to this. I asked specifically in my interview, which you should, how many double books, how many this, how many that, and stand your ground. Say, I did not agree to this in my interview. I would have not come here if I known I was going to be triple booked.
Yeah, I will say too, like if it really comes down to it, any situation that we've had, especially outpatient clinics where, like say you have a patient till 4 and they want you to clock out at 4. It doesn't really make sense a lot of times. Like if the person's leaving the door at 4:02, how am I supposed to be done with everything, documentation, turn off the lights, do everything by 4, right? Situations like that where maybe I went over 30 minutes on the week or something and then they made a big deal about it, like just citing the labor laws to the manager always made them back down. They would either say, okay, we'll adjust this, we'll pay you for the overtime. They always are.
The backpedaling that happened when Jared responded, well, you know, I didn't actually mean that. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
So a lot of these managers and these facilities, you know, they're also being, I guess, pressed with demands from higher up. And so often they're used to pushing things on people. And a lot of times the people just back down and they'll do, like, say, work 30 minutes off the clock. And they're like, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal. But, you know, it kind of is a big deal. It's your life, and you should have your free time. So we never were the therapists that were willing to do that. We would clock in when we got there, write our time down, and clock out the time we left. And if it was overtime, then we got paid overtime. If it wasn't, then great. But
and I mean, you know, if you were looking at your phone or you were chatting too much, and you were there 30 extra minutes, but it was kind of your fault. You know, I mean, be reasonable, right? But like, if it's consistently happening, the schedule's not reasonable, the amount of support staff that you have is not reasonable, the tasks they're asking you to do, it's just not reasonable. You're doing your very best and you're getting overtime. Write it down.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a side rant about the demands side quest about the demands of facilities that are often unreasonable. But we don't want to scare you. Not all travel jobs are bad. This is just therapy in general. This is just healthcare in general. Perm staff, travel staff, we're all being asked to do more. You have to just stand your ground.
Honestly, travel gets a bad rap, but of all the facilities we've been in a lot of facilities over the years, the people that get abused the most are the permanent staff, because especially back when the job market wasn't so good, these, like one of the facilities we worked at, it's in the middle of nowhere and there's not a lot of job options. And these PTAs that were working with us, they would just get abused like crazy because they didn't have other options. And the facility knew that. They were like, okay, we'll just let you go. And we got other PTAs that
we would try to get them to stand up for themselves. And they would just tell me, they would be like, I can't afford to lose this job.
Exactly.
They're like, I have to clock out. They were the ones that were standing in the hall with their iPad, couldn't get a patient because the patient was, you know, with the nurse or with the whatever. And they would clock out for 15 minutes because they couldn't get a patient and they didn't want their productivity. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
so this is not a travel thing. And in a lot of ways, travelers have much more leverage than permanent staff have because we can always leave. We have a lot more options than somebody that's stuck in this town that has a house there, that has kids going to school there, that there might not be other prospects. So
all right, well, hopefully that gives you guys a good picture of what's happening with the job industry, the travel therapy market. It's definitely a great time to be a traveler if you're considering it. Please reach out to us if you have questions. We have helped thousands of other therapists get started and be successful in this career path. We think that you can really use this career path to your advantage, to meet your financial goals, to explore the country, to reduce burnout, because you have the opportunity to be at somewhere short term and then change it up the next contract. So we think there's a lot of positives to getting into travel therapy. If you're thinking about doing it, now's a really good time, whether you're a new grad or a permanent therapist thinking about leaving. So reach out if you have any questions. Let us know. Last question or last comment that came through. I agree. I feel bad for the full-timers. I tell them to speak up. The facility needs us more than we need them. You guys are the best. Thank you. Thank you so much for participating and for your feedback. We really appreciate it. And keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone.
All right.